It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
Let's now talk about the 6 ways to actually do real estate.
So we sat down and we thought about this because we think about, when we started having this conversation, Brian, there were a few that immediately kind of popped up to us. And we said, well, let's slow down for a second because there are a lot of different ways to invest in real estate that I bet most folks, even most of the Money Guy family, probably don't realize they're real estate investors, even when they didn't know they're real estate investors.
Yeah. The easiest, lowest lying fruit, and we did this on purpose, is home ownership.
Yep.
Home ownership is the majority of us, that's how we're doing real estate investing. And you think about it, here's some stats. And by the way, we used median numbers, not the average, because I know a lot of you guys, whenever we do the shows and we talk about average, you pick on us a little bit. So we use median numbers on this. The median net worth for Americans that are over 18 is $136,000 a year. The net worth, median net worth excluding their home, is only $55,000.
So total net worth was $136,000, but you take the home out, it was only about $55,000.
So if you finish the rest of that, that means 59% of a lot of people's net worth is tied up in their personal residence. It is their biggest asset.
And your personal residence, surprise, surprise, is a piece of real estate.
Yep.
That actually is. Now, we don't call homes investments. We like to call them use assets. But the fact of the matter is, it is a real estate investment.
And I think, by the way, those numbers, y'all know, we're for the 20%. We're not for the 80% that are struggling through discipline issues. That's not going to be you. Any of those that are building an army of dollar bills through that 20 to 25% growth, we know you're going to blow these numbers out, but it's still something to pay attention to. And then I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the huge tax benefits that also occur with your home ownership. Do you guys realize if you live in your house, your primary residence, for 2 out of the last 5 years, and it can be even less than that if you get relocated for work or other things, up to $500,000 of your gains are completely tax-free.
I think, Brian, in the tax game, that's one of the most amazing tax tricks that there is out there. I can't think of another type of investment that allows you to shield that much capital appreciation.
So $250,000 for single taxpayers, $500,000 for married filing jointly. This benefit is so good that I know quite a few builders. Pretty much 2/3 of them move every 2 years.
And you might be saying, well, why wouldn't they just build a house that they love? And why wouldn't they just build it and stay in there and, let the grass grow and the trees grow? It's because of this huge tax benefit.
I don't know if I would wish this tax benefit upon myself because I hate moving so much, but I have watched my personal builder for my house here in the Franklin, Nashville area. I mean, I think he's on his 3rd house since I've known him.
Yep.
And he just keeps doing it and think about it. If you can do 500, if you're in a fast growing economy where assets are appreciating, plus you can build a house substantially cheaper than what market is because they're building it at cost.
Yeah.
There's going to be some huge gains there. He probably realistically is getting a $250,000 a year tax-free benefit. Because if you think about married couple, $500,000 tax-free, that is huge. Because ordinary income, I'd have to make a lot of money to generate $500,000 of tax-free.
So I can already hear people out there right now saying, oh, well, this is just too good to walk away from. I need to go buy the biggest, most expensive, nicest house I can buy so that all that capital appreciation will be there. So I have this huge benefit. Not so fast.
Well, you run the risk, and this is something we saw before the last real estate downturn, is you don't want to be house rich and life poor.
That's right.
And that's one of the things we put out there is because there are a lot of people, and you have to be careful talking to your mortgage brokers, you have to be careful talking to your real estate agents, because remember, they get paid depending upon the size of your purchase. So sometimes that creates a slight conflict of interest. The better way to protect yourself is to ensure that you're keeping your housing expenses below 25% of your gross income. And you might even get to a point, I will tell you, this happened to me in my 40s. I could go bigger. I could get a bigger house. I could afford a much more, a larger mortgage. But now that I'm getting to be in my late 40s, I just want to own everything, and I'm tired of swimming upstream. So a lot of you you'll want to fight that urge to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger because why?
And you've heard, I know a number of you have listened to our previous shows where we talk about buying homes. And we said, you know what, when you're first starting out, 20% should be the goal, but it's okay to waver on that a little bit if certain circumstances are taking place. The 25% is pretty important. I would not waver on that too much. I would really try to stick to keeping your housing costs below 25% because that is what's going to get you in trouble.
So let's talk about real quick. I want to close out home ownership and talk about the limitations. The first thing, and Bo said this earlier, we consider this a use asset.
That's right.
It's kind of hard if you got into a pickle of a situation. It's hard to turn that equity in your house into food on the table for your family. So just remember, it's hard to spend equity since it is a use asset.
Or how about this? You saw this firsthand, Brian. Back in 2007, 2008, you said, you know what? I've got all this equity in my house. I'm covered. Even if I need to get to it, I've got a checkbook. I can do that. Well, if we see a really big downturn like what we saw in 2008, there's a chance that all that equity, that stuff that you could have used to buy groceries, disappears overnight.
Yeah, home equity line might get shut down or frozen by the bank very quickly. I've had that happen to me. And so that's what my last cautionary thing is. Remember, in order to get assets, to turn this from equity in your house into where it's food on the table for your family, you either have to sell the property or you have to take on more debt.
That's right.
And as you guys know, as you're getting older and you try to simplify your life, debt is usually, that is not in the same sentence as financial independence. Mm-hmm. Obligations and independence do not go well together. So that moves on to, let's talk about lax geographic diversification.
Yeah, a lot of times we think about real estate, you've heard people say real estate is location, location, location. When you buy a primary residence, you have real estate exposure to one location, and it is on the piece of earth where your house is. Maybe that's a really good thing, or maybe it's not such a great thing, but it's not a diversified real estate holding.
Well, if you remember in 2008, 9, and 10, there were some key areas that got crushed. Mm-hmm. It was, Las Vegas, Florida, and I'll say, we lived on the south side of Atlanta. Yeah. South Atlanta, my house went down by 50%. Mm-hmm. It is hard, and it still, by the way, has not fully recovered. So it's crazy when you move to a higher cost of living area like we did to Nashville. Sure. It gets very scary. And then the other thing is, if you did, you want to be careful with how much you put in. A limitation is you don't want to have 100% of your real estate concentrated in only residential real estate, which is your use asset. Yep. Just very scary stuff. So number 2, passive via portfolio, Bo. What do we mean by that?
So I think if number 1, primary home ownership, was the easiest one, I'd say passive via the portfolio is probably the second easiest one, right? That's what most people have. And this is exactly what it sounds like. This is buying stocks or mutual funds or ETFs that invest in real estate holdings, whether it be real estate investment trusts or other types of real estate. But these are publicly traded real estate investments that you can go out in your brokerage account and buy.
Now, Bo, we've been on a tear recently with, truthfully for the last decade, a trend of we love index investing.
Love it.
Love index investing because it is super cheap. You can practically, these price wars with Fidelity, Vanguard, Charles Schwab, and TD Ameritrade, now they're about to be Schwab, but they beat each other's heads in so much that the prices of trading and investments is practically free. Yep. But there is one thing that has kind of bucked, at least in our thought process. Do you want to buy real estate in an index?
Yeah, our thought is right now, maybe that's something you ought to investigate, because one of the things about a lot of indices that you can invest in is they're market capital weighted, right? So the largest segments in the market get the most exposure. Well, if you think about ways that real estate is changing right now, perhaps through e-commerce or other things like that, maybe you don't necessarily want to be in a market cap weighted index. Perhaps you'd want to use maybe an active manager that can make a decision to allocate towards or away from different types of real estate holdings.
So I love because that used to be when all the brochures and all the TV ads, where everybody had their proprietary system with their research was better. I'll say it even simpler. Amazon and online shopping is changing the way real estate. We don't go to the malls as much as we used to. That is going to have some ripple effects. So you just kind of need to think about those in a macro sense. But it is one of those things. I think you said it in a great way, Bo, but it is something to pay attention to. And that leads us to let's talk about the limitations to doing real estate, or even better yet, first give people an idea of what can they expect or what's happened with real estate in the past.
Yeah, so we said let's just look at the historical performance of just publicly traded real estate investment trusts. So we went and pulled this, and this is data from 1997 all the way through 2019. So that's 23-ish years about. And you can see that like the S&P 500 U.S. large cap has made 10.2% annualized over that time period. Real estate's actually done a little bit better, even with 2008 right there in the middle, 2009 right there in the middle. REITs as an asset class have made about 11% per year. So they do have very strong performance when you look at it relative to other domestic types of investments.
So it's definitely a viable thing.
Sure.
If we were talking about downsides, I mean, I guess the only thing is that it's super passive. So your hand's not in the cookie jar.
Sure.
It's not in the cookie dough. You're not really adding much value. You set it and forget it with this. And then the other thing is that it's not so concentrated. The risk isn't concentrated, so probably the rate of return is not going to be a moonshot. Meaning that this is going to be something where, yes, this is a little sweetener above and beyond like the risk and returns of large cap investing. So you're not going to make necessarily like 100 to 200% on one deal.
And the other thing I would think about is we've already discussed that, real estate kind of has a U-shaped recovery. Well, just because you're investing in real estate in an equity market or in the stock market doesn't mean that you're completely immune from that U-shaped recovery. We've seen this happen where real estate holdings might be down for a while and stay down for a while, even though you're not buying the real estate itself, you're buying the investment asset that invests in real estate.
So let's talk about the third way. Now, this is the one that's kind of juiciest because we had home ownership was number one. Second easiest was probably just passive real estate, like in a mutual fund, ETF, something like that. The third is the one that you see all the marketing systems on.
This is the sizzle.
Residential rental property.
Yeah, these are the folks who say, you know what, I'm going to become the land baron and I'm going to become the real estate maven, the tycoon, and I'm going to have this entire real estate portfolio. I'm going to make a gazillion dollars.
Mailbox money.
Make mailbox money, renting real estate to other folks.
And it does, but I got to tell you, it's far from passive. We've covered this previously, but I think it's worth repeating. There's so many components when you get into residential rental property. It's purchase price, occupancy. Are the quality of the tenants, and the consistency? Are you going to need to take in reserves for vacancies? There's so many things. How much you need to require? You got to have reserves for cash in the bank for months between tenants, general repairs, overhaul expenses. Good part of this, if you're thinking about maintenance, is just you have to put carpet and paint.
So if you have good tenants.
The reality is that good, it goes way beyond the good because there's cabinets, sheetrock, fixtures. You'd be surprised at how hard your tenants can be on the property. And I'll be honest with you, this wouldn't be my first swim into risk investing.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is that I'm always shocked because you talked about this earlier in today's show, Bo, is that we have 20-somethings. They'll say, I got my cash reserves. I don't even know if they mentioned they have their employer match, but they're like, I can't wait to save up enough money to go put a down payment on my first rental property. Right. And I always think about that. Wow, do they realize Roth IRAs grow completely tax-free? And that's easy. That is setting up something pretty easy. Or how about the employer match on your 401k? Knock out, remember in the financial order of operations and some of what we talked about on when you should invest, go get that easy stuff. And that's why this is typically financial order of operation number 7, because it is not the lowest lying fruit. You got to respect the FOO, the financial order of operation. So, well, you don't want to get caught. You don't want to get over your skis.
Make a T-shirt that says "Respect the FOO."
Respect the FOO. I'm telling you, because you don't want to get out over your skis in an economic downturn, because that is when it's scary. You want to have some girth to your net worth before you really kind of get.
We got to put that on a T-shirt too.
You got to get this stuff figured out, because if you don't have girth to the net worth, you could get yourself in some situations.
I love it. So not all residential real estate investing, residential rental properties are the same. There's a few different varieties. And I think what's wonderful, Brian, is, again, because of our client base, we've seen folks who've done all of these, and we've seen folks who have just the absolute best, most wonderful, exciting stories about how they've built wealth this way, and some that have just been absolute horrendous nightmares.
So let's go through the pros and the kind of the cons of residential rental property. So the first is that you are buying an appreciating asset with other people's money. That sounds awesome. That's in the brochure.
Yep.
Because it's great. You're collecting the mailbox money by collecting the rent, and you're paying the mortgage with that money. You are paying for an appreciating asset. It's going up in value with other people's money. And then think about this. Once the mortgage is paid down, got a nice annual cash flow. There's a lot of people thinking this is going to be their pension.
This is their pension. That's exactly right.
They get this cash flow coming in. It's leverage growth. We've already talked about that. If you want to know how you turn a 4% asset, annual appreciating asset, into 12.5% over 10 years, it's through leverage growth, using that debt to take a down payment, but then let it be amped on the total the appreciation of a much bigger asset. That's powerful stuff.
And can I tell you the one thing I think that gets me the most frustrated when I talk to clients who want to go start investing in single family homes? Generally, this is the way the conversation goes. Man, we've been doing so well. Income is really high. Man, I need some deductions. So I need to go buy some residential rental properties because I need to start finding some losses. I need to start getting some deductions so I can offset. How many times do you hear that in the course of a year?
It's in the brochure, but they don't notice that asterisk that says, you realize once your income is over $150,000, we're not going to let you take these deductions necessarily. You have to start accruing them. So not only are you losing money on this investment, especially during a down economy, you can't even take the deduction on it. So pay attention to that stuff. So here's the negatives. You have to deal with tenants. They're not usually the most financially responsible people. I'm just being honest with you.
Not in most circumstances, but a lot of circumstances, the reason people are renting, there's some reason they're renting. Maybe they're short term. Maybe they're not sure if they're going to be settled. Maybe they couldn't go buy something. You probably, if you're going to have a residential rental property, you need to know how you're screening the folks that you're going to let live in and be in that rental property.
You definitely need to be involved. You need to be an active landlord.
Once again, how it's not passive.
And you also have to be responsible for the repairs, the bills, keeping tenants, and making monthly mortgage payments. None of that. You can set it on autopilot, but there's going to be things that come up on a Thursday night that's going to require some attention.
But I hear people, then people all the time, well, no, I don't have to worry about that. I'll just have a management company. I'll just hire a management company, and they'll take care of all that part.
And that potentially could make it much more passive, but the problem with a management company is they usually take 10, I've even seen as high as 15% of gross rent.
Sure.
And that truthfully is kind of the cream.
A lot of the profit,
that's where the profit lies. So you got to pay attention to that. And then I put this as a negative, leveraged asset. Remember how I told you it was a positive, that it's growing. This is how you turn a 4% asset into a double-digit growing asset. But it also is one of those things that could get very expensive very quickly, because a lot of times when you see real estate systems, they're not telling you to go buy one house. They're trying to tell you to get to that critical mass. You want to get 10 houses. You want to get to 20 houses. The problem is that when economies go down, they don't typically, it's not all in a vacuum. You will see that you won't have just one house that's sitting vacant. You might have 5 houses sitting vacant. And it could really, that leverage debt starts weighing on you really quickly. It multiplies.
So one of the questions, Brian, we talk about this whenever we counsel business owners. We always talk about what's the expected outcome you think, what's your best case, what's your worst case. We do that with rental property too. We always tell someone, what if you get your tenant in their very first month, they tear the place up, and then it sits empty for 12 months? Do you have the cash reserves? Do you have the wherewithal to be able to weather that? If you don't, maybe you don't need to be entering into those waters.
I'll say it this way. If you're doing rental property and you're broke on the front end, this is going to be your way to build wealth, but you haven't had wealth yet. This is a recipe to be a financial victim. So just be very careful. Real estate is outstanding, but it's kind of like you hear people say, banks never want to lend money to people who need the money. They only want to lend money to people who already have the money. Real estate is kind of one of those sweeteners you put on if you have, like I said, girth to the net worth, and you can let this thing build upon the leverage growth opportunity there. Let's talk about multifamily rental properties. So what's the pros and cons of multifamily? Because if you're not doing single, maybe you said, well, instead of buying 5 rental houses, single family rental homes, why don't I just do a duplex or a quadplex or something like that? Let's just go ahead and knock this out. And I'll go ahead and tell you, here's a little real estate hack that I love, because it saves you money on your mortgage rate. It also lets you be an active participant and keep an eye on the tenants. Is what if you do, and we have clients that have done this, what if you start your rental portfolio with a duplex or a quadplex where you actually live on the property?
Love it.
Makes
it really easy to keep an eye on tenants.
That is a great way. You keep an eye on things. You get, like I said, lower mortgage rates. it really is an incredible thing, and it allows you to increase the return through economies of scale. Because now instead of having 4 pieces of property that you have to go cut the grass on or make sure the grass is being cut on, make sure the repairs, you can now have one location that has multiple people, multiple families all there. You also concentrate the repairs and maintenance. It's just a lot of good things. Now, the negatives is it's probably going to require a larger purchase price. That means bigger down payment. It's going to be a leveraged asset risk is going to go up even higher because you're dealing with bigger numbers. Right. The bigger the number, the bigger the risk. Better rate of return, though. So it is one of those things you're balancing out. And then the last category I put on residential real estate was old vacation rental property. And we've done so many Ask the Money Guys because this is something I know a little bit about, is because the brochure on this.
How do you know a little bit about vacation rental property?
Because I fell prey to the brochure is the fact that I'm going to go buy beach property that I can take my family down to and then use other people's money to pay the mortgage on this thing. What could go wrong? I mean, this just sounds awesome. We'll go down to this awesome place. What you don't know, here's the cons. You only get to use the property during off season.
Because the rent's so good and in the on season,
because you have so many people want to rent. It's too profitable and the season's too short for you to be using it during the peak season. So you actually never get to go to the property during peak season. Off season, the property is likely to just sit there vacant. You are lucky if you get a snowbird in your beach property during the winters. And your family vacations resemble off-season repair and maintenance sessions more than they do a vacation.
So like you go to the beach and you get to like replace the couch. Or
you get to work on sheetrock. You get to paint. And this is more if you're more wired like I am.
Come on, kids, let me teach you something.
My buddies, I'll tell you, I go on an annual golf trip every year. The trip started with me loading them up, telling them we'll go down to Florida and play golf, but we'd actually end up replacing mattresses, hanging TVs on the wall, painting things. It's really laughable. Now this thing has continued, and I've sold the property, so it's truly turned into a golf trip with my former neighbors. But it was for all too often. I'm sure these guys were like, wait a minute, there's a reason that he's not charging us to be down here. So it is one of those things. And then tenants are really rough on short-term rentals now, because I know a lot of people out there talking about VRBOs and other things but if people, we make the joke that treat it like you rent it, and and that means you're ragging it pretty hard, and you'd be surprised at it was not uncommon. We had to replace couches, mattresses, and everything every 2 to 4 years. A mattress that would last 10 years in your primary residence, you're going to replace every 2 to 4 years in a rental property.
And then I think this is the one that I hear all the time, Brian. I have a client say to me, I take the family on vacation. We go to the beach every single year. Rather than just throwing that money away, I want to just buy a vacation home, and that way we can go there. We can build memories on home. What I usually try to do is say, let's look at how much you're going to be spending on that to buy it, upkeep. You could probably spend a lot less money just renting and going on vacation and changing the locations you get to go to and going on different types of vacations. While that sounds good in theory, it's a way to justify going on vacation, a lot of times in practice, it doesn't actually make the most sense.
Yeah, it likely is going to be cheaper. Now, I know there's going to be people out there say, I bought a house in 2010 that is just a peach. You bought property in 2010.
That's right.
It's back to the whole thing with real estate. A lot of your success with real estate is when you bought. If you bought at the downside of that where the market got crushed in 2008, 9, 10, 11, if you bought then, you probably did great. I have a client who's going to watch this. He's a podcast guy, and he's done. When I saw his net worth, and I was like, wow, you bought all this in 2010? He goes, it's great, isn't it? So, it is one of those things where all those negatives I said, if you got it right, but that's when I see real estate's had such a great run, be careful, guys, because that purchase could be it's scary.
Yep.
Number 4. Commercial real estate. You're thinking, I don't want to deal with the headaches of people living there, because people could do all kind of weird stuff. They could tear it up. But surely commercial property, having a CPA in my office building, what could go wrong with that?
They're running a business. They want to make sure it stays looking nice.
Because that's in the brochure on the pros, is that you're going to have stable tenants that pay decent rent with automatic increasers built in there. And I got to I'm sure our landlord, I think he likes us.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because we are good tenants.
Yeah.
Every year there's an elevation in what we pay. Heck, I pulled a paper towel out of the commode today from, another business is in the building. So I'm kind of like a handyman that's doing stuff for him. I've fixed the commode at least 3 times. So, there's stable tenants and good tenants. that's a good thing. And you can build large equity asset with other people's rent money. So
100%.
once again, there's another benefit using leveraged asset with other people's money. This is sounding pretty good. And then there's also, and this is another hack, maybe like owner tenants get better rates because the banks, once again, it's less on the risk profile. If you're actually on property, they'll give you better mortgage rates on it. So that sounds all really good.
So if you're a small business owner, has a profitable business, and you're expanding, and maybe you need a real estate look at, maybe it does make sense to go buy a commercial building. You rent that building or use that building and then sublease some of the rest of it to help offset the rent.
And think about this, like we are in that specialized service that gets excluded from QBI. You know, we don't get the 20% for the 199A. If we owned real estate, all of a sudden we get the 20% benefit. So there's definitely some pros there. But let's talk about the cons. Large down payment, guys. They're going to want you to put down 20, 25% on this stuff. And since buildings are expensive, it's going to take a big chunk of money. You go back the truck up.
I was going to say the barrier to entry, generally speaking, in most markets is a lot harder to get into commercial property than it is residential property. It's just a bigger nut to take on.
And then the other thing, like automatically, real estate potentially is not liquid. I mean, it could sit on the market. You got to get real estate agents and others people. There's a whole transaction recording fees. The problem with businesses, I go and look at commercial real estate all the time. You'll see buildings that sit there for over a year because they're very specialized buildings looking for the right business to come and make use of that. So there might be a long period of time that the property could sit vacant between tenants. And then it's harder to sell and turn that into liquid cash.
Yeah, they don't move as quickly as residential properties move.
Number 5, private real estate deals.
Yeah, so this one is a little unique. So this one is kind of where you enter into a real estate partnership most often, where you want to be in some sort of private deal where you have other investors that partner along with you. You pull your money together and you go invest in real estate, whether it be single pieces of real estate or diversified pieces of real estate geographically.
So and it's typically like general partner and you're a limited partner.
Right.
And by the way, this one does kind of resemble passive because you find the
extent,
right
yeah.
to, but we'll get into it. But it is one of those things where you could potentially set it and forget it if you do your due diligence on the front end, and then hopefully collect in the background.
Yeah.
That's what you're hoping for, so it does allow some form of passive investment if you connect with the right general partner. And by the way, this has changed. When I first graduated college, I worked in public accounting. Everybody knows that. And I remember that one of the first CPA firms that we were doing work, these were deals that investment advisors as well as other real estate people would go and kind of organically put together professionals.
Sure.
They'd have a general partner that's kind of overseeing it, taking a management fee. Now we got all these crowdfunding that has kind of jumped into this. It's much easier through technology where there are now groups that will put these deals together. And look, and even some of these, I don't consider this completely, but in some cases it is. This is where you have to be careful. The dumb doctor deals label comes in because doctors get pitched private placement deals all the time. You have to be qualified, accredited investor. All this can offer some opportunities, but it can be expensive.
And one of the things we talked about, Brian, is there are a lot of different types of private deals that you can get into. So even while it may be passive once you're in it, making the decision to get into it generally is not passive. You need to kind of vet that to make sure. And one of the things that you said, and I've heard you counsel clients on this, whenever you're thinking about entering into any sort of deal as a limited partner, you ought to have a conversation with the general partner to ask them how much skin do they have in the game. Is their money actually on the line as well?
And if it's not their money, how much of mama's money is in the deal? Because I want to know anytime I'm dealing with a general partner who's putting together deals, going to be collecting a management fee, you want to know how much of their own money, how much of their own net worth, and how much of their family members are tied into the deal. And then you want to know what the fees are.
That's
Get a
exactly
complete accounting of all the fee details because there's usually going to be multiple elements. There's going to be their ongoing annual management fee. There's also going to be a participation rate because at some point, this property is either going to get refinanced or get sold. And that's when it's going to be a cash out event for you, the limited investor. You just want to make sure, do you get all of that, or is there going to be a split where if there's any rate of return over a certain high water mark that goes back to that general partner? You just need to make sure you understand all the fees, And then also know that, like, I've seen deals where we were doing fast food joints. I've seen deals where we're doing apartment complexes. I mean, these things can take all forms. Just make sure you know the risk profile and what these people are actually doing and what their track record. Because if you do find the right one, it could be good.
Absolutely.
But pay attention to the details.
Love
it's
it.
not set it and forget it. And then this is the last category, and I put this on last is because we kind of went in order of what most people do with home ownership, passive portfolios, and then we got into single families, then the commercial, and then private real estate deals. The last one we put on here is that really the shot across the moon. This is where you're really trying to hit land development.
Yeah, this is the thin air. Not a lot of folks fall into this one.
Well, it's much more speculative because it is, I mean, it's one thing to go see a big plot of land and go, that looks like money right there. And in a lot of different ways, because big money, here's the pros. I'm talking about one deal could potentially set you for the rest of your life. And that's the moonshot
And
here.
we've seen that happen.
Yeah, I've seen people become incredibly wealthy by just being in the one right deal that kind of set them up. Now, look, it had tremendous risk to it. And what I mean by that, because it all ties in. It's all built onto the same equation because the same benefits that give you the moonshot is also the negatives that cause this thing to be so high risk is because you got a lot of leverage. Usually you're not doing this straight up with cash. You're doing this with the leverage. And then the other thing is the logistics can be a hot mess. I mean, local governments with zoning, planning and zoning, all the environmental tests you have to do when you're developing, whether it's residential or whether it's commercial, all this stuff, you're having to deal with a lot of hands. That's why you'll do contingencies. It's not going to be a fast-moving process.
And then how about even all the infrastructure that has to go into it, depending on what type of property you're developing, whether it's residential or commercial. It can be pretty involved in terms of all the different. You have to kind of be an expert at all the different pieces of it to make sure it works really well.
Utilities, amenities, the roads. You know, there are a lot of things that are going to get sorted out. So you're going to make a lot of people money. You're going to make your attorneys who are dealing with all this, the engineers, the architects. I mean, there's all kind of people that will be dealing with, being this developer. But it's the whole part of where I talked about it's not an overnight success. This could take years to develop, and this also leads to, it's not uncommon for real estate development to have a boom or bust type cycle where you'll see people make a lot of money or go broke because it's so speculative. And that's what led me to, this is the thing I think is amazing about multiple deal businesses, meaning that they constantly are doing real estate development, is that I'm amazed, and it goes back to some of that tax-favored stuff with the 1031 exchanges and other things, is that you keep reinvesting all of your gains into bigger and bigger deals, and you're just hoping the music doesn't stop before you get your big payout.
I've actually asked some folks to do that. I said, what are you working towards? Because all I want to do is make sure my last deal works. That's the whole goal of it, is I just want to make sure the last deal I do is the one that works. And I'm like, what if the last deal you do is the one that doesn't work? You gotta, this is for a different type of investor who's willing to take on this sort of risk.
There's a reason we said the 6 types of real estate investing. We want to cover it all. We want to cover something as basic as you owning your own primary residence, all the way to the moonshot of you're doing real estate development and really loading it up and putting a lot of money out there.
So at the end of the day, we think that real estate is a fantastic investment. There's a number of different ways that you can do that. What you have to make sure of is you understand where you are in your financial wealth building journey, what your unique time horizon, risk tolerance, goals, purpose of investing. You have to answer all those questions because it's not what the brochure says. One size fits all and anybody can do it. If you fall prey to that, odds are you're going to get yourself in a bad spot.
Yeah, you got to, there's some basic skill sets here. I think it's no coincidence CPAs are usually really good to real estate because there's a lot of financial calculator skills. You need to be good with the numbers. This is not something you have to be a cowboy, meaning that you're okay and very comfortable with risk, but also have to be analytical of the fact that you understand how the numbers flow and you're good with a spreadsheet. CFAs probably wouldn't be bad at it either,
they'd be okay with it.
But there's a lot of components that go into successful real estate investing, and you can do it, but I felt like you needed somebody to give you an honest assessment of what goes in this and what makes it successful, and please do respect the foo. If you don't know where your financial order of operations are, you could get yourself in a world of hurt. And that's the whole purpose of us wanting to go into a deeper dive here. I think you could tell no agenda here other than making sure we loaded you up with as much. And I felt like, Bo, the trouble with doing a show like this is that truthfully, we could have done a show on every one of those 6 segments. So, yes, we left some stuff on the table. It got edited out when we were going through this. But we knew if we're going to do this in less than an hour, we're going to have to go at this quick and hard. And, guys, we did it. So I want you to give us your comments. Leave some comments on the YouTube channel or go to moneyguy.com and leave us a question or comment right there and to connect with us because we love getting feedback from our audience.
If you love what we're doing in terms of how we dive in, we have a brand new, can I even say it's still brand new? I think it's still brand new. We have a resource page available out on the Money Guy website. Go to moneyguy.com, click on resources. We actually have out there for you deliverables, PDFs, spreadsheets, things that you can download to actually use to build your wealth through time. So if you haven't had a chance to go check out our resource page, make sure you go and do that.
And a lot of you are probably like, wow, that was a lot of information in there. These guys covered from residential, my personal residence, to REITs, to all the way even to commercial development. How did they do this for free? And the reason is we call this the abundance cycle. We want you to come, learn, apply, grow. Some point in the future, we've planted enough seeds that we know this works. You're going to reach a level of success that you're going to say, man, this is too much for me to do on my own. I need a co-pilot. I need somebody to help me. And you're going to take it to the next, you take the relationship to the next level. And that's where we come in. We work with clients all across the country. Go to moneyguy.com. You can go to contact us. You can go to aboundwealth.com. We love our Money Guy family. And thank you so much for watching the show today.